The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi everyone, we are really excited for today's session on how to improve DevOps productivity with our guest speaker, Peter Death, who is the Development Manager at CGI. Now, before we begin the session, if you have any questions for Peter, please fire them over via the chat and question box, and Peter will answer them at the end of the session. We are also recording the session, and this will be made available after the session by email. Now, I'm going to hand over to Peter to kick us off. Thanks, Peter.
Thanks a lot. Okay, so again, there's quite a lot of information in this webinar, so I'll try to get through it as quickly as I can. And if you have any questions, please ask them at the chat and I'll pick them up at the end. So this webinar is about how to improve DevOps productivity. My name is Peter Death. I have over 17 years development experience and 7 as a managing director. So most of my experience in DevOps is actually as an implementer, being part of a team that's either implementing DevOps, working with people, creating bespoke code and getting them in. I currently work for CGI. So CGI was founded in 1976. It's one of the largest independent IT providers in the world, and we've had consistent growth. But a quick disclaimer, contents of this webinar are just my opinions. They don't necessarily represent CGI's strategies, views, or opinions. And CGI itself is not recommending any tools, organizations, or techniques that I mentioned. So this webinar is purely saying, you know, I've been doing Agile and DevOps and Waterfall for a long time. There are lots of pluses and minuses. I'm expecting most of the people on this call are familiar with DevOps already or have some notion. There are lots of good webinars and things to tell people how to get into DevOps, but these are some of the things that I've noticed, both within CGI and within other organizations, and some of my tips to improve DevOps productivity. So agenda, very, very brief overview of DevOps. I've not got long for this webinar, so I won't be going into a lot of detail. But if anyone's got any questions, let me know. Talk about the benefits that DevOps should provide, talk about some of the implementation statistics in DevOps, and actually say why it isn't unusual that people don't see all those benefits, and then talk about the holistic changes that are required for DevOps, in my opinion, in the areas of training, career development, knowledge sharing, processes, project structure, management tools, and then some further reading, and then some Q&A. So very, very brief overview of DevOps. You know, in my opinion, DevOps can only really be done on top of an Agile project. DevOps is all about development and operations working together. It's about being reactive to change. It's about being able to fix things quickly. And in order to enable this, you have a lot of tools and a lot of practices. You start off in your factory environment where you're doing continuous builds that should be automated and continuous integration of all of the different parts of your solution. All of your testing should be automated. So you should have continuous testing. You know, ideally, every time you merge your code into a main branch, every time you do a deploy in factory, you should run all of your tests to enable you to make those fast changes that you need for feature or bug fixing or security reasons, and to enable those to go out onto production in confidence because you've got a comprehensive automatic suite of tests that run for each of those changes. You should have automatic deployment for very similar reasons, so that you can push out changes into your factory environments for test in exactly the same way that you'll push out changes to production, so you don't have any sneaky changes going into production that need to be picked up. And manual steps that people are writing down that might be missed if you need to do a release quickly. And so that you can have confidence in the repeatability of the process and you can get those changes going out quickly. You should have something that people often miss is continuous monitoring. So you need good tools out there so you can monitor the whole system, see where there are problems. And you should have self-healing systems. You should have robust systems that can recover from failures, that can log those failures in a good way, that can be pushed all of the way back into factory where we can fix those failures quickly, that we can test them, deploy them, and get them out, into production. It's, DevOps is founded on the basis that, much like Agile, you see benefits from any new enhancements or anything else that you'll do when that working software goes on to production code. So DevOps enables that process to happen in the quickest, safest way possible. Again, yeah, lots of things you want: infrastructure as code, security and compliance, dashboards and metrics to help you do that. So many good articles on DevOps to talk about it. So why do people do DevOps? Lots of people talk, and there are many good reports about the benefits. I've picked a few of them that are endorsed by CGI. So we should see reduced deployment maintenance costs by up to 6 times. Again, because we've got those tools in to make our code release reliable, to make our code release quick, so that when we're not introducing new bugs because all of our testing is automated. So we can bring down those maintenance costs, and reinvest that money into new features. Increase speed to market of up to 92%. Because we've reduced the cost of doing deployments, because things are automated, because we don't see the mistakes, because we've reduced the risk, you can get those new features out to your market much quicker. 24 times faster recovery time from failures, again, because you've got self-healing systems, because when you have a problem, you can fix it. You can fix it quickly and properly. I have spent my life, working on critical systems, control systems in the utility, space and defense sectors. These are systems that don't necessarily want to have 50 updates a day. However, when you have a problem in these critical systems, you might have service level agreements that say they have to be fixed within a day. So while your routine deployments might be much less frequently, you have to have DevOps tools in so that you can identify the problem, fix the problem, test it reliably, and get those patches into your critical systems as soon as possible. 50% less time remediating security. Again, a very important statistic, to make sure that we can patch those security holes as soon as they've become, widely known. 3 times lower change failure rate. People will only make changes on production systems if they're confident, and all of the automatic deployment and testing, gives us the lower rate of failure and gives us the confidence to introduce those changes. 22% less time on unplanned work. I never, so I always say you can't stress enough how important that statistic is. Unplanned work not only disrupts your plans, that's taken away from the amount of time that you should be spending on creating new features, new enhancements, but it can be very disruptive. One of the worst things, for teams is, context switching, or when these unplanned work comes in, you might have to put something down halfway through and then pick it up. You might have to have your key people taken away. They may then block other people. So that's 22% less time is not just on that unplanned work, but also and all of the impacts that unplanned work has to the rest of your planned work. And then employees are 2.2, it's rather specific statistic, more likely to recommend their organization as a great place to work. Certainly one of the things I've seen both in CGI and in other companies is that people working on DevOps projects are happier, they feel engaged. Developers and IT people, they're creative people. They want to make something that brings benefit to their end users, and seeing, their enhancements go out, spending less time on unplanned work, seeing the benefits actually makes them a lot happier in their jobs. So, do people see these benefits? A lot of the times they don't. And one of the reasons for this is that actually a lot of companies that say they're doing DevOps aren't as fully through the DevOps implementation scale as they think they might be. I've pulled these stats from the Puppet State of DevOps 2018 report. I think they're quite illuminating in terms of they look at how far through companies that say they're doing DevOps are in terms of their implementation in what they termed the evolutionary scale. So you've got 11% of companies rated as actually fully implementing DevOps and therefore probably seeing a lot of the benefits that I've just mentioned. 79% of people implemented some of the DevOps. They may still have some siloed teams. The development and operations might not be working closely together. So they're on their way, but they won't be seeing a lot of those benefits because fundamentally they haven't implemented everything. And 10% actually at a very low level of implementation and probably not seeing a lot of their benefits. I mean, DevOps is an interesting technology because unlike some things where if you invest, a small amount of effort, you start seeing a lot of the benefits straight away and it tails off. With DevOps, to see a lot of those benefits, you actually need to implement a large amount of it. If you've implemented half of your testing, you'll have some reduced regression risk, but you still might have a lot. And if you need to run all of your tests, you still doesn't mean you can get stuff out quickly, and you don't see all of those benefits that I've just mentioned. Again, from the Puppet State of DevOps report, something they had that I found was really interesting was they've surveyed different levels within organizations and how far those different levels think they are in their DevOps journey. So consistently what you've seen is the C-suite people feeling that the DevOps implementation is very far advanced. So for example, teams contribute to improvements to tooling provided by other teams. C-suite people think 64%, we're doing well on this. Management, middle management, slightly less, 46%, and then teams all the way down at 35%. And this becomes really important when you look at things like one of the fourth line down there. Security teams are involved in technology design and development. A key area to reducing our risk. And you've got C-suite people saying 64% saying, our security teams are embedded. Management, now just under half saying, saying they're embedded, and going down to, under 40% when you get down to the team level. So it's really important that you have honesty, going throughout your chain, because otherwise your C-suite people, your management people will feel that they've invested in DevOps, that they're doing DevOps. And the team people might be right, and that you're not actually that far through, and then your management and your C-suite people might be saying, "But why aren't I seeing all these benefits? I think we're doing this. I think my security teams are embedded, but my security incidents haven't gone down as far as I thought they should have done." And it's quite important that the management and the C-suite know how far you're on your journey, because otherwise they won't be willing to invest more in order to see those benefits, because they think they've made the investment already and they haven't seen those reductions. So I think that was a very useful statistic, and it's worth in any organization going back and seeing, do you have this misalignment between C-suite, management and team? So why this isn't new or unusual, the productivity paradox hits again. So stick with me on this as an analogy, but I'm going to take us back over 100 years to cotton factories. And the owners of cotton factories, you'd have a single steam engine in their factory that would run all of their presses and all of their looms. So you'd have one giant steam engine running, and then you'd have lots of gears, you'd have lots of belts, you'd have lots of other ways of, pushing energy around that whole factory, which gives you a single point of failure or multiple single points of failure. The steam engine goes down, your whole factory goes down, your critical belts break, everything goes down. Inefficient, because I've got one steam engine, it has to run. Even if I just want one loom running, I'm losing a lot of my energy as it's being transformed through all of these different belts and gears. It's dangerous. Actually, we look back and lots of people, were killed when belts snapped, or, they're trying to make changes in the system that's running. The whole system had to be run on a single speed. Your steam engine only produces one speed. You can use gears to transform it, but again, it's wasteful, and everything's running or nothing's running. And it's hard to maintain or expand. You need to make a repair to your single steam engine. You take the whole factory out. You're needing to put a new belt in. It's hard to do it. Again, these problems meant that the steam engines weren't as maintained as they should have been. You had more breakages because they couldn't afford to bring anything out. So what was introduced? Electric engines. And your factory owners, over 100 years ago thought, oh, right, there's these electric engines. They're meant to solve all my problems. So I'm going to rip out my single big steam engine, and I'm going to put in a new single large electric engine. hook it up to my existing, belts and gears, and I'm soon going to see all these benefits. And they didn't. They still had a single point of failure. It was still inefficient. It was still dangerous. Whole system still had to be run based on a single speed, and it's still hard to maintain and expand. So a lot of these companies, they've invested, they've had this new technology, and they've not seen these productivity improvements. Now, an odd thing starts to happen, years and sort of decades after the electric engine was introduced. New factories have come along, and those factories haven't just replaced their single large steam engine with a single large electric engine. They've changed it. They've introduced small electric engines and hooked those up to the individual presses and looms that they've got. They've redesigned their factories. They've torn them down. They've taken out all of these belts, and they've hooked stuff up directly. All of a sudden, these new factories, they don't have a single point of failure. One engine goes, the rest keeps going. It's not as inefficient because the mechanical engine energy goes directly to the presses and looms. It's not as dangerous, less people being killed. The whole system doesn't have to be run on a single speed because a press and a loom can go at different speeds, and little electric engines can run at different speeds at different times and quite efficiently. And it's not as hard to maintain and expand because you can take out an electric engine, you can put in a whole new electric engine and loom without redesigning the whole thing. And this is why it's called the productivity paradox, because what we've seen actually is decades after the introduction of the electric engine, you actually see a boost in productivity in these cotton factories, not because of the innovation that was made now, but the innovation that was made decades before, but has only just been introduced in the correct way, i.e. they've taken a holistic approach and they've replaced everything and looked at how the new innovation, the electric engine, can be used. So what have we seen, in terms of IT, which we care a bit more about? So we've had our old standard, single waterfall delivery. And again, I've worked on waterfall projects for a lot of my career. It's good, it works well for the right projects, it's the best way. But you've got separate testing, architect and development teams, IT and operations are separate, users and management are separate, and those are all feed into that one big waterfall delivery. So you've got your single point of failure. If that big delivery that you're making every 6 months or a year fails, then you're not seeing anything. It's inefficient because if I've got small changes that could, deliver value, I'm not getting those. I have to put a lot of sunk costs in. I have to spend months of development work, and before I actually see any benefits from that in terms of products that come in that I'm seeing those business value for. It's dangerous. We live in a world of rapidly evolving security problems. If I'm only doing a release every 6 months, am I only fixing those security problems every 6 months? I've seen in a lot of organizations the fact that it takes so long to test, moving to a new operating system or making fundamental changes to the design, that actually those places might use old, tools, operating systems, antivirus, because it takes so long to do the retesting and make those updates. The whole system has to be run based on a single speed. Again, I might have lots of little changes, but I don't see those until all of my big changes coming through. And it's hard to maintain and expand. I'm only getting my maintenance in those big deliveries. I've got, manual testing teams. So I might a change that might be quite easy to implement, might need a lot of testing to make sure it's good. And it's harder to put new things on because I have to create lots of new tests and potential risk of regression. So along comes DevOps. Some projects, not all projects, but some projects says, all right, I'm going to introduce DevOps. I'm going to have a single delivery still. I'm still going to have all of my team separate, but I'm going to add some automation, make the installation a bit better, which is always good. Now I'm doing DevOps, I'm going to see all my benefits. But you're not, because you've still got that single point of failure. You're still not releasing frequently enough. It's still inefficient because maybe your teams aren't talking to each other. It's still dangerous because you're probably not releasing enough to get all of your security updates and patches. Everything's still running on a single speed, and it's still hard to maintain and expand. So you'll see some of the benefits, but you've got those fundamental problems, which is why if you take a holistic approach to DevOps and restructure what you're doing, much as the cotton mill people have to, then you'll start seeing some changes. So from having your separate, design, development, and test teams, you have security teams, embedded throughout everywhere. You have cross-functional teams of developer testers, working in areas and moving functionality between them. On large projects, I still recommend having a separate architects team to help bind those cross-functional teams together. But you have product owners rather than users who are able to make decisions quickly and authorize changes without a large change management board. And you've got management embedded and working with everyone throughout the system. You've got those frequent deployments, you've got the monitoring, you've got your continuous integration, continuous delivery pipeline. You've got your behavior-driven development, you've got full automation, infrastructure as code, and self-healing. What starts to happen? I don't have a single point of failure. Now I could lose one of my teams, or I could lose one of my deployments. It's okay, I keep going. It's no longer as inefficient because I can, my changes are getting to the users as quick as possible, so I don't have all these sunk costs before I realize my benefits. It's not as dangerous because I can fix my security problems as quick as possible. The whole system doesn't have to be run on a single speed. Changes that take a long time can be implemented in parallel to quick changes that go out. And it's no longer hard to maintain or expand. So that's the overview, that's the holistic approach. And then here are not quite random, but particular things that I've noticed, to how to implement that holistic approach, in the different areas. I've tried to pick up on things that I've noticed that haven't been repeated in lots of other webinars, but obviously some things are generic. And I've started off with training and career development because it's an area that some people often miss. Promote those cross-functional developer testers. If you want a team to be able to genuinely pick up work and move it forward, rather than having that handoff between development and testing, having people working, especially if you've got automated testing in DevOps, then you need people who can who can write those automated tests as well. So you'll get a better understanding, better developer testers picking up responsibility, and you'll get that better throughput and better quality of code. Review and possibly update your career pathways. If you've had the same career pathways for 10 years and they reflect team leaders and project managers rather than scrum masters and delivery managers, then people working on DevOps and Agile projects might not feel that what they're doing contributes to their career development. So make sure you enable your underlying career pathways to promote that. What do developers, testers aspire to be? What do scrum masters aspire to be? It's questions you need to answer in your organization. Train the management and the workers. DevOps is hard and people need to know their responsibilities. You can't just say to someone, you're doing this or you're doing that, and expect them to pick it up and run with it. And use expert trainers. That investment in training will really provide benefits. Train your end users, train your product owners. They have to know their responsibilities so they can pick up and work as a self-managing team. And have a structured training plan that people can pick up and use going forward and tick off where they're going. And promote team players. Again, part of DevOps is that nice, reliable code. We don't want emergencies. For those of you who've read the Phoenix project, we don't want the Brents going around and fixing everything. We want to promote the people who work in the teams that provide that nice, stable code base and product where things don't go wrong and you don't have the emergencies. So promote those people who bring the whole team with them. And have dedicated time for training. It's so easy to get lost. We've all got products we need to deliver, but if you don't take time to step back, to look at the new tools that have come out, to know what you're doing, then you'll start getting lost. Knowledge sharing, rotate work and pair programming. Again, I've always found that if you rotate work amongst people, you might get a little bit less efficient at the start because people are picking up new tools, but generally speaking, developer testers will produce better quality work that's more maintainable and extensible if they know somebody else will be picking it up. And pair programming is a great way to share knowledge and increase the quality of your code. Identify your knowledge sources and artifacts, everything from the self-documented code to your automated processes, making sure your decisions are recorded so you don't keep making the same mistakes again and again. And have a centralized system or systems for knowledge sharing, ideally a single tool for searching. Slack and Rocket Chat are a great way of, when people are asking questions, those answers are recorded. Wikis and Confluence with Gliffy, again, is something I've personally seen, really good and really well used. Make sure you record the answers to any questions, and if you've got a wiki, something's wrong, then update it, maintain your wiki, and also prune it, and have a new joiner pack. So when someone joins a team or an organization, they know what to do and they can get up to speed. Processes. Again, I'm quite old-fashioned, so I see things in an old-fashioned way. I see the continuous integration, continuous deployment pipeline as a compiler for your system. It's the thing that's bringing everything together. It's the things that build in all of your subsystem components. It's things that run in the test. It's things that create the package, and ideally the things that deploy in your package automatically. So you can't, you have to invest in that, just as 20 years ago we were making sure you had a good compiler. You need to make sure your continuous integration, continuous deployment pipeline is working and people are going through it, and that you're monitoring it. Look at your test-driven development, your behavior-driven development. Again, personally, I think Cucumber really good for this. Continuous testing of non-functional requirements, especially security and performance. If you've got a security problem, you need to know it. We live in a world of lots of open source things coming in, so you want to be looking at things like JFrog X-Ray to scan your dependencies for vulnerabilities and fixing them, and making sure that any performance problems are picked up and resolved. Automate everything, so it's predictable and you can rerun it quickly. Integrate very early and very often. Again, some of these things are obvious, but you still need to do them. In terms of your processes, continuously review your processes and justify them. Many years ago, when I first introduced Scrum to a company, it wasn't as popular back then, but that was because we were looking at our processes and someone said, well, this Scrum thing looks interesting, shall we do it? And we did, and it was good. New processes will come along. Just because something's a good idea today doesn't mean it's a good idea tomorrow. And your teams should be buying into those. If they're just rubber stamping a process, then it's probably not useful. Make sure you refine your definition of done and everyone understands it, so you can sign off your stories. And think about context switching and limiting your work in progress. You don't want stories put on hold. You want to complete your stories and your features and your epics so that you can get that business value. And if people are jumping around and moving between stuff, that context switching will slow them down. And all changes should be based on business value. If you can't justify a change in terms of either current or future business value, even the non-functionals in terms of robustness and performance, then you should be reevaluating why you're doing it. And embed security at every level. I can't say that enough. I mean, I'm saying DevOps. Whenever I say DevOps, I mean DevSecOps or SecDevOps, whatever you need to say. I think any software development, security needs to be at the heart of it, and DevOps and DevSecOps really, promote that, which is great. Project structure. So have cross-functional teams. Long-lived teams that survive multiple projects are really good, especially with those self-managing teams. They need to know their team members and work with them, so you'll get that performance improvement over time. Promote and respect those team players, those people who are helping everyone else and bringing everyone along with them. Don't have silos or a team dedicated to component. Again, this is the way I tend to work. I like to rotate components across teams, much for the same reasons that you want to rotate work within a team across individuals. The more people who work on something, often the better that is in terms of extensibility, in terms of maintenance, and you're bringing the whole team up with you. So, and co-located teams. So generally speaking, everyone in the team should be in the same location. But again, different teams can be in different locations. In fact, a lot of the large projects that I've worked on, I've had teams spread across multiple places, and I've actually seen quite a few benefits from that. There are problems in that in terms of communication, but it can encourage people to document stuff and write stuff down. Recruitment is always a problem for any organization, getting those best people. If you're in multiple locations, you've got more resource pools to swim in to get those good people on. And they're also exposed to other people within the locations that they're working, and they can bring new ideas and processes in. So I've actually seen quite a few benefits in that multiple location approach. I do still recommend having a separate architect team for large projects. We're pushing so much of the low-level design, development, and testing down onto the individual developer testers. You still need, I think, those architects to help bring everything together and have a bit of consistency across the teams. If you're using the Scaled Agile framework, then consider the system team carefully. I think the system team is a really good part of the Scaled Agile framework. They're there to help look after the CI/CD pipeline, to integrate what the other teams are doing, and to help maintain the tools, support the other teams, but also to help deploy the outputs of those teams. But like a lot of teams where they're doing a lot of support work, a lot of unplanned work, then Scrum probably isn't, in my opinion, a good, agile approach, for that. Something like Kanban, where you don't have, you can react more quickly. With Scrum, you're trying to protect the sprint and trying to have known work. If you've got most of your work is intentionally unplanned, then it's hard to use Scrum. Ensure your metrics are incentivizing what you want, and agree the metrics across all layers. So again, this is promoting honesty, promoting transparency, and if your metrics are just saying, I just want the stories completed as soon as possible, then that's what you'll get. If your metrics are emphasizing quality and emphasizing the underlying business value, then that's what you should get. And ensure that any project contracts you have, whether you're a supplier or whether you're a customer, enables Agile and DevOps. If they're not written in appropriate ways, then you won't get what you need. Management structure, I'd have a flat management structure with self-managing teams, so push that responsibility down, and also it encourages those really good technical people who've been with the company a long time to say, yes, I can be senior and in a delivery team. Scrum Masters are not team leaders, and they shouldn't be treated as such. They're there to facilitate the team. They're servant leaders, but they're not there to tell the teams what to do. As soon as they start doing that, you lose the benefits of having a self-managing team with that responsibility pushed down. Accurate reporting. Again, people need to understand what's going on. Create a safe place to fail. If you're not in a safe place to fail, then you're not able to move quickly enough. If you're constantly analysing every problem and trying to prevent that happening again, I mean, waterfall is really great if you're trying to look and have processes to avoid failures. If you start trying to avoid everything and try and say, I never want every problem to happen again, then you'll introduce processes that hampers that rapid development and release. We should be having these self-healing systems that can recover from problems, and that we can get quick patches out. It doesn't mean that we create unreliable code or less buggy code, but it just means that we recognize sometimes that things will go wrong, and we look to fix it. But we're not trying to think of everything to stop something going wrong. So don't act on every retrospective comment. Sometimes people are saying stuff, and if especially if you're introducing Agile and DevOps, if you give it long enough, then things will resolve themselves. Understand what people are actually doing from a management perspective. And we've got a famous quote that by John Wills, that bosses don't know 50% of what IT does, and I think that survey from the Puppet DevOps State of DevOps report actually shows that management don't understand sometimes what's actually going on. Remove dark work. Again, you want to be transparent. If you're trying to sneak work in or hide work, you won't understand your capacity properly. You won't understand how much work you can do, and improve your reporting on software pipelines and enforce automation. Talk to people and understand what they're doing. There's I think as a long-standing manager, there's you can't underestimate walking the floor plate, talking to people, looking at their boards if they're using boards, getting down and saying what they're doing and finding out what's actually stopping them being productive. But also understand conflicts and points of escalation. It's hard in DevOps and Scrum teams and Agile teams where that responsibility is pushed down. People can get very stressed, and you have to be there in terms of management to help understand, to resolve those conflicts, and to help the teams work together and work with other teams. Tool Snapshot, there are loads and loads of tools. CGI is not recommending any of the things on this this page, and to be honest, these pages get out of date. I'm sure a new tool has been released during while I've been speaking. But I would say look at the different areas that you need tools. So look at your user story, backlog and prioritization. Look at your code versioning, your automatic testing. Look at your code quality analysis and your containerization and your storage. Look at your deployment, and test environments and your configuration management, things like Ansible. Look at your integrated testing, looking at Cucumber and Selenium. Look at where you're deploying to. Is it OpenStack? Is it Azure? Is it Amazon Web Services? And your continuous monitoring. And be prepared for things to change. So you're sitting there and suddenly GitLab turns up, and that's crossing lots of areas in terms of requirement management and in terms of my source control. I sit there and suddenly Azure DevOps is replacing Team Foundation system, and do I need to pick that up or not? What are the benefits? We've forgotten about Kubernetes and OpenShift, and all of a sudden, instead of doing just using virtual machines, now I'm using pods. Keeping on top of a lot of these things are challenging, but what DevOps allows you to do is to make these fundamental changes, to update your code base, to update those tools with the knowledge that you can limit the regression impact by your automatic testing. Further reading, again, there's lots of places to look. DORA is always good, DORA State of DevOps report. CGI has our own holistic approach to DevOps and our services. Puppet State of DevOps report, I mentioned a few times. State of the Agile report, there's a nice DevOps reading list there. Scaled Agile framework, again, lots of people love and hate Scaled Agile framework. I think there are a lot of benefits to it, and Gartner as well. So that's the end of my very quick webinar on DevOps productivity improvements. Little link up there for cgi.com/en/careers and our hashtag experience CGI. So what I'll do now is start looking through the questions. Okay. So one question here. Would you agree that DevOps implementation is very dependent on mindset and cultural change/adaptation more than toolset implementation? Yes, I would completely agree with that. I think the reason that I've spent a while showing, going from steam engines to electric engines is because that's a real key message, that unless you've got that culture, unless you're prepared to make those holistic changes, then you won't see the benefits. So it's something that needs to be done. Okay. Other questions. How do you practice honesty in the DevOps process? So honesty is a tricky one. I think I've been lucky on all of the projects that I've worked on. I've had a good relationship, with both, developer testers under me and, senior management above me, so that I can have that honesty going up. I can be honest with customers, and generally speaking, I find it makes life easier. I think, like anything, you learn. For example, if at any point you're shooting the messenger, then you won't be promoting. An honest environment where people feel that they can genuinely say where they are. I think having retrospectives where things are open, things are on whiteboards, but equally so that you can talk to people, because sometimes people can be negative and you want people to promote the positive things that they're doing as well. Just because one person says something doesn't mean that everyone agrees, so having those sort of retrospectives where everyone together will help. And I think it's a sort of cultural thing that evolves over time. I've had people join my projects, and senior people say, "Oh, I can't believe how honest it is in here. I've just seen people, say stuff. I'm surprised by that." I said, "Yeah, well, that's what we're doing, and that's what we're like." And they become very honest as an approach. So I think it's fundamentally respecting others, even if you disagree with them. And it's having those processes so that you're sometimes seen to react or sometimes not. You're viewing people, and that you never shut them down. Okay. Just looking at other questions. Are you using something like G-Cloud or AWS to store microservices? Again, because I'm working in the space and defense sectors, I won't say what I'm using, but certainly those big cloud-based services are very good for microservices and for scaling up and scaling up, quickly. Equally, sort of private clouds for those more sensitive, projects work as well, and things like Kubernetes can be installed, both offline and online. But yeah, lots of benefits to both. Just looking at any other questions. how can you find where you are on your DevOps journey? So I'd look at, DORA. There's, CGI is a DORA partner, and those DORA evaluations are really good in terms of seeing where you are and being honest with yourself, and getting an external company in to perform those evaluations can be really useful. And I think I've got 5 minutes, so just looking at other questions. How do you evaluate your benefits? That's quite hard. Certainly in terms of the engagement of people working on projects. You can look at turnover, how frequently people leave in your project, and company compared to the average. I've generally seen a much lower turnover on DevOps projects. In terms of failure rates, that's something you can only see over time. In terms of business value, you can see how large your WIP is. Most projects will have that in terms of WIP, and how soon they're getting things out, and how soon they're seeing those new features delivered to customers. Having lots of built-in metrics in your system, so you can see about how much downtime you have, how long you are for maintenance, how long upgrades last. I think one of the points I mentioned is it's very important to know what your key metrics are, so that you can measure yourself against them. And if they're software metrics in terms of performance or reliability, then have those stats and be conscious of where you are, so that you can ensure your changes are meeting those key goals. Okay. When a company is in transition between legacy and DevOps-enabled target architecture, no doubt be a hybrid period when you enter a state when the old world is ITIL and waterfall, whereas the new world is DevOps and Agile. Any words of wisdom here? I think the best thing you can do is be open and honest and give yourself time. So I think in terms of the stats that we saw, that most companies are on that journey. I think that's fine, and that's to be expected. Trying to break down your system into components so that you can have proper DevOps and change control on those where you can, running systems in parallel. But you'll encounter problems if your C-suite and your management think that you're further along than your engineers think you are. But not expecting miracles on the first day, and expecting to put in that effort in terms of putting in your new tooling, putting in your training, early on. And when you're doing those demonstrations to customers, whereas on a waterfall project, you might start development and then have something that you could show very early on, but it hasn't been through testing, it hasn't been through deployment, and they don't get it for a few months. When you're doing DevOps, because you should be doing your testing up front, because you should be doing your deployment, people might think, well, you're doing DevOps and you've not done as much as I might expect on a waterfall. You have to say, well, that's because unlike a waterfall, this isn't just a prototype or a first draft. This is the system that you can deploy, because I've done all of my testing before I've shown you. It's actually deployable. And, so ironically, sometimes at the start, people think, well, there's a slowdown here in what management are seeing. But then it speeds up when people actually start getting things and start getting changes. And you really need to empower your product owners. Because if your product owners aren't able to approve or disapprove, and you go for a big change management board, then you'll be slowed down. Would you suggest Docker as a containerization system? I like Docker. I think there are lots of benefits to it. I also quite like Kubernetes and how quickly that's been picked up and run with. Again, these are my personal views rather than the views of CGI. I attended the Red Hat OpenShift conference gathering in London recently. I found that really enlightening. I think there's some good things coming in OpenShift 4 or 4.1, which would be the first version to work on anything other than AWS. I think there are distinct advantages. I was talking to someone just earlier about how some of the things that I'm doing on the current project, if we were using Kubernetes or just containers, it would be a lot better. But know what you're doing. Get a small prototype environment up and running. Understand what this means in terms of management. There's a reason Kubernetes comes along, and that's to help you, manage pods and improve your reliability and get those things out and improve your scalability. So certainly lots of benefits, but try and program for microservices from the start. Okay, and I've got 1 minute left, so one question. You didn't talk about issues with ITIL view of services in ops. DevOps is rather more orientated product. I think ITIL is coming into DevOps. You see a lot of people saying how ITIL works with DevOps. I think people are starting to see the benefits. People are seeing that DevOps isn't and should never be a complete lack of control. In fact, DevOps is about having more control, about knowing everything you're doing. While people might say in Agile it's sort of working software over comprehensive documentation, sort of the answer to that in DevOps is that the more things are automated, the more documentation you've got there. And I would also say you do need documentation. You do need to go through all these processes, but that might be a side effect of working in places like utilities, and defence and space, that we still do a lot of those good processes. And I would actually say by focusing on what we've got and automating, you end up with a much more reliable and robust and well-documented system, because you've automated as much as possible and it's clear what you've done and what you haven't done. No one's stopped me yet, so I'll carry on looking at questions. Would you recommend the Expedia Labs periodic table of dev tooling? Yes, I do look at that. I think it's good. I think it's almost a bit too good, and sometimes you can think, oh, that's the only thing I need to look at, and you can get a bit of linker to the rest of the world. But yeah, it's a really nice tool, and sometimes they give away like posters and fridge magnets that are good. Okay. And I've just overrunning a little bit. I think I've answered a lot of the questions
Peter.
that have been put up.
Hi,
Yep.
Peter. It's up to you whether you want to take one more question from sort of one of the ones that was sent earlier, or you're more than welcome to finish the session now.
Okay. Okay. Any more questions from anyone?
That's a last call. Okay, it doesn't look like we've got any more questions coming in. So thank you so much, Peter. It's been really insightful, and I'm sure everyone feels the same. And obviously, thank you everyone for attending the webinar. Just so everyone knows, we will of course send the recording out of the session. And if you are looking for potential career opportunities, we will be sending the relevant information, so please do get in contact. Equally, Peter's more than happy for you to connect with him on LinkedIn to continue those conversations with support. I'm getting lots of thank yous in, Peter, so it's been a great session. Thank you so much, everyone. Okay, bye.
Okay. Thanks a lot. Bye.